So am I audible to everyone? And can you see my screen?
Yes, you're audible. Yeah.
Okay.
If yeah, we can see.
Sorry.
आप एक इसको full screen कर लीजिए तो maybe that's
जी
maybe.
जी जी मैं कर रहा हूँ जी. And I think you're recording it, right? So I don't need to.
Yes,
Right?
yes, I'm recording.
Okay. Okay. Okay, assalamu everyone. So okay. So today we'll be talking about a little bit of medical imaging or biomedical imaging. There are subtle differences, but again, for this lecture, we are going to assume that they're roughly the same topics that we're going to talk about. And the introductory lecture, I'll try to divide it into two parts. The first part is not related to the tasks that you will be doing. It is take it as if you're watching a movie and you're just watching some graphics and some storytelling, and without much understanding, or you don't need to worry about what is the basic algorithms or what is the basic mathematics behind it. So I'm just trying to motivate the need of this field and why we can't live without it, and why this field is so much important for engineers like ourselves who are interested, who have invested their careers in actually developing this field forward. So it will be a whirlwind tour on medical imaging. Obviously, medical imaging is a huge field, so I'll be focusing on a very, very small aspect of it. But again, it's small but yet profound. And then we are going to switch to what we are going to do in today's lab. Okay. So a little bit about myself. So my name is Hassan. I direct the Clinical and Translational Imaging Lab at LUMS here, and I'm an assistant professor in electrical engineering. So a bit about myself. So I did my undergrad in electronics engineering from GIK, and then I taught at UET Lahore for almost 3 years, and I was also the part of the pioneering team of SSC LUMS 10 years ago. And then I went for my graduate studies to Johns Hopkins University, where I was primarily in electrical and computer engineering department, but I was also associated with maths, where I did another graduate study in optimization, and my whole research has been on medical imaging. So I developed computational algorithms using machine learning, deep learning, optimization, signal and image processing tools to answer problems in clinical imaging. So I did my PhD from Hopkins, and then I did my postdoc from Yale School of Medicine. And I've been teaching for more than 14 years now, with both here as well as abroad. So again, these are some of the topics that I work on. So theoretically, as I said, that I develop computational algorithms. So computational algorithms are at the intersection of theoretical topics like machine learning and deep learning, parameter estimation, optimization, statistical tools. And then I apply them to multimodality imaging, which I'll share with you what these things are. And I'll talk about some of the problems that I've been working on. And my lab is funded from Higher Education Commission of Pakistan and from SSC. So I thank them for their grants that have supported this research. And you can find my websites at the bottom, and you're more than welcome to visit them. All right, so at the start of it, I'll be talking about image reconstruction, and this is my motivation that I'm doing for the past 6-7 years. When I talk to young students who are aspiring engineers and they want to find out what relevant fields they should be focusing on, so we'll be talking about image reconstruction in this one. So at Hopkins, when I was supposed to present my work to a non-medical imaging audience where people are working on speech and robotics, it was a bit challenging for me to decide how can I explain the medical imaging directly, because they're not familiar with this field. So I started thinking about it, and I found that nature is the biggest metaphor for scientists and engineers. And all of us know that there are lots of problems which the nature dictates us, and we have spent, the human beings or the mankind has spent decades or centuries on trying to solve this problem. And the first problem is described in a very cartoonish figure here, where Newton actually observed this falling apple, and he presumed and he proposed that there must be some force that is pulling this object down, because why it always falls down, why it does not rise up. And this was basically the motivation behind his masterful and groundbreaking work on gravitational force. Similarly, the Wright brothers, they looked at these flying beings or birds, and they studied the aerodynamics and aerodynamic equilibrium of these flying objects, and that motivated them to actually come up with this vast theory of aerodynamics, and how can we have these objects which can fly in equilibrium, in dynamic equilibrium, and they can be suspended in air. And therefore, the motivation actually came by looking at these natural objects with their wingspans and how do they use their wings? What is the aerodynamics that make them actually fly and without any turbulence and stuff like that? So they looked at these flying objects and they get motivated by these things. And that actually has resulted in this whole revolution of aeroplanes and flying objects, helicopters, and stuff like that. Similarly, there is another schematic at the bottom right, which all of us as kids have actually witnessed since maybe as a teenager or even before that. So we know that objects cast shadows. So we are three-dimensional objects, so like ourselves, like the space that we live in, and even these birds that you can see, this pattern of birds. These are three-dimensional objects, and we have been playing with these shadows all our life, all our childhood life. We have been studying that, okay, at certain time in the day, our shadows are prolonged, and in certain times of the day they shrink. So we know that these three-dimensional objects create these two-dimensional shadows. So if you look at these shadows on the road, these are two-dimensional projections or shadows of these three-dimensional objects. So this is the problem. This is the forward problem which nature has posed to us many, many centuries ago, or in fact, like since we had our conscious mind and we have been observing, we have been seeing these kind of things. But a scientist, instead of looking at the forward problem, he is interested in the inverse problem. And the inverse problem is, if I have these shadows, these two-dimensional shadows, can I reconstruct the three-dimensional object? So that's the question that a scientist or an engineer looks at. So the forward problem is dictated by the nature itself. So if you have an object which is impeding some light rays, it will create these shadows, and these shadows are basically projections. And if it's a three-dimensional object, it will cast a two-dimensional shadow. If it's a two-dimensional object, it will cast a one-dimensional shadow. So we have this kind of forward problem that we have been observing throughout our life. But the inverse problem, or the backward problem that is interesting, is that if we have these shadows, can we reconstruct the three-dimensional object or not? So that's the main question here. So keeping this cartoon and this figure in front of you, this was the first instant where a scientist actually applied this concept to the shape of the Earth. So this has been belaboring mankind for a long, long time, that what is the shape of the Earth? And what we could not see Earth like we can see these birds right in front of us, but this Earth was out there in the outer space. We did not have mechanisms to actually image that. So how can we actually predict what is the shape of this object? But what we had was observational data. And the observational data was being observed by Greek mathematicians and philosophers, like, for example, the lunar eclipse. And the lunar eclipse is one when the Earth interpolates the direct path of the sun and the moon. And what happens, because it blocks the sun rays, the moon actually creates a shadow. And the shadow is always a curved surface, as it is shown by this red arrow. So Aristotle was looking at this observational data, and he found this observation that no matter what angle I look at, the shadow is always a curved surface. So this was the observation. He could not see the Earth directly, like we can see these birds. And we can see that these are three-dimensional objects. And what is the shape of this object? So Aristotle had only access to these projections. By his naked eye, he could see these projections, and he found that, okay, these projections are always curved shadows. These shadows are always curved, no matter which direction I look at. And what he concluded, due to his powerful intuition that he had, was that the Earth is basically spherical in shape. So the sphere is the only object that can cast 2D shadows no matter what angle you look at it. And this inverse problem he solved without the access of any computers, without any mathematics, just the powerful intuition that he had in his mind. And therefore, he solved this inverse problem just by looking at the shadows, that Earth actually is spherical, which we now is geospherical. But for that, at that time, just to make this conclusion, based on these two-dimensional shadows, that all of these shadows are curved in nature, that the Earth is spherical, was a groundbreaking achievement. So the problem that we are going to talk about is, can we reconstruct 3D shape of any object be it regular or irregular, from its shadows? So that's the question that we have in front of us. And the answer to this question is yes. And here is a setup, an engineering setup. So don't worry about the terminologies, just focus on the intuition here. So we have a turntable here which can rotate. We have an irregular object sitting on it. On one end, you have this light, there's a lamp which is emanating these light beams. These light beams actually intersect this object. So the object blocks some of the beams and it casts a shadow on this translucent panel. And I have a camera on the other side and it records these shadows. Now, what I do is if I rotate the turntable by 360 degrees with one step increment, so 0 degrees, 1 degree, 2 degree, all the way to 360 degrees, I collect the shadows of these objects from different views. And this is what I call as multi-view data, because you are acquiring these shadows from different orientations, and these orientations are 1 degree steps from 0 to 360 degrees. So you collect multi-view data of this object in the form of shadows. Okay, so again, so we have an irregular object. It is blocking this a lamp, this light rays, and it casts a shadow on this panel. And I'm recording these shadows, which is 2-dimensional. So by the way, the object is 3-dimensional and the shadow is 2-dimensional. And I'm using this camera to record this shadow. And I collect 360 shadows, one for each degree of orientation that I have. And once I have this multi-view projection data or multi-view shadows, I can reconstruct the 3D shape of the object using a technique which we call shadow carving in computer vision. So we're not going to talk about this, but this is a setup where I'm showing you how we can collect multi-view data. And just believe me that there is a technique out there which actually helps stitch these shadows into this 3-dimensional object. But now we want to push our imagination forward. What is the most complicated object that exists on Earth? And that is basically the human body. And we can't see the shape of the organs from outside unless you slice up a person through surgery. So those objects, like what is the shape of the brain, what is the shape of the heart, what is the shape of the liver, that is completely opaque to us from naked eye. We can't see that. So is there a way that we can image the inner structure of a human body without slicing that subject? So can we use this approach to actually image human organs? And the answer is basically that it is not possible. So can anybody tell me why this is not possible?
Visible light does not does not pass through the human body.
What do you mean it didn't pass through the human body? It did.
The opacity for visible light for human body is much greater.
I did not say this is visible light. I just said it's light. The answer is partly correct, but is there any other reason that why this technique is not going to work?
Sir, because there's not only one organ, there are many other organs as well. So we can't just...
Okay. So part of the answer our friend earlier gave, part you have given. Anybody else?
सर मेरा तो ये जवाब था कि हमने कभी दिल निकाल के इस तरह देखा नहीं किसी ने.
वो तो मैंने क्वेश्चन पूछा ही नहीं. Okay, anyways, okay. So I think the answers are partly correct. I think both of you are right. So basically, this approach will only capture the outer shape of the object, the outer topology, the external topology of the object. It cannot tell me what is inside because I have not collected that information. And as our friend pointed out, there are multiple organs inside the human body. We cannot collect that information about the geometrical property of each organ based on the simple experiment. So basically what we need is something as follows. We need a setup which has to be something similar. So the setup will be roughly similar, as I'll show you in a moment, but we need a mechanism. We need some sort of light source or whatever, some sort of rays that penetrate the human body. And as they are penetrating the human body, they collect information of the organs they intersect. And that property should be the geometrical property or the material property of that organ. So that once I receive that rays on some source, on some sensor, I can use that information and reconstruct the geometry. So now let's look at this in more detail. So now the point is that we want to capture the internal structures. So if you can think of this as a human, as an object, so this is a rock but there are some internal things that are embedded in this rock. So I cannot get that thing with this method. So now let's see what we can do. So what we can use is we can use some penetrating X-ray source. So an X-ray source is going to emit X-rays, and think of this red thing as this is called a Sheep-Logan phantom. It's an object that we use for doing simulations and image processing. And you can think of these ellipses. You can see these dark ellipses and some light ellipses as multiple organs. So you can see that some are very distorted along the major axis, and they're very stretchy ellipses. And you can think of these as different organs, different shapes of the organs inside a human body. So, and now because it's a two-dimensional object, it will create a one-dimensional shadow. So basically, we have an X-ray source. These X-ray source emit X-rays in some orientation. So let's say these are parallel beam of X-rays. And as these X-rays pass through my object, they're intersecting or negotiating different structures inside the human body, and they get attenuated depending upon the material property of the organ. Some tissues will attenuate these X-rays more, and some are going to attenuate less. So once these X-rays leave the human body, they get attenuated by different amounts. So for example, this beam is not intersecting the major chunk of the organs, so it won't be attenuating a lot. But this beam is intersecting a lot of organs along its pathway, and it will get attenuated more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to collect these one-dimensional projection profiles for every rotation. So I'm going to rotate. So I'm going to rotate the source, and so this is the source here, and this is the detector. So the detector is capturing your one-dimensional profile or shadow or projection, and basically this is the X-ray source. So I'm going to rotate this setup by 1 degree at a time so that I get multi-view projection data spanning 360 degrees. And using this data, where each projection carries information about the material property of the inside organ, I can reconstruct the object. So if I look at the math, which is actually governed by the Beer-Lambert law, it is as follows. So I0 is the initial intensity of the X-rays. I is the measured intensity at the detector level. Now this integral, so this mu xy is basically a two-dimensional image of the material property, what we call as attenuation map. So this mu is basically the attenuation map of the object. This is what I want to reconstruct. So now once a source enters this body here, and as it traverses through this path, it gets attenuated one by one as it meets different material properties or tissues. And as it leaves, it is attenuated by the cumulative sum. And therefore, this is the cumulated attenuation that you get. That's why you have an integral here. So again, so the X-ray source enters this point, and by the time it leaves the object, it has been attenuated by different materials it has met along the way. So unka jo cumulative effect hai, in discrete terms, we can say it is a sum. In continuous term, we are going to say it's an integral here. So this is basically the modeling equation that we have here. So I is the measured intensity, I0 is the initial intensity of the X-rays, and this is by which they are attenuated, by this exponential factor here. Now I know I, which is basically a projection, I know I0, I need to solve this integral equation. So how do we solve it? Don't worry about it, but this is the inverse problem that we solve. That given this ratio of the projection data that we have, which is the projections normalized with I0, the initial intensity, I want to solve this inverse problem, which I call as the integral equation. And this actually gives me the attenuation map of the object. And this is what we call as the CT scan. So what you do in CT, you look at an anatomical image, and that image is telling you the material property or the density of different tissues. And that is basically this mu xy, which is a two-dimensional attenuation. You can have three-dimensional attenuation maps also, but for now, we are going to focus on two-dimensional attenuation. Anybody who has any questions about this so far? Ji Aisha, puche.
Sir, what do you mean by attenuation?
So attenuation is basically when your signal is reduced in intensity. So let's say you started with, let's say, a signal which is of power 10, but after some time it reduces to 5. It means decreasing, attenuating. So like, do you understand? It's
yes,
a simple word. It's a reduction in the signal intensity. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Attenuation. So attenuation of a radioactive source is called radioactive decay. Basically, if you want to use the word attenuation here. Okay, so basically यहाँ पर ये हमारे पास एक equation आ गई है, and this setup, which is kind of similar to this setup that I have, where I have a source and detector, the light beam and the camera. I rotate them throughout the object 360 degrees. So I collect multi-view data, and using that multi-view data, I'm able to solve this inverse problem, and I reconstruct images, which I'm going to show you in a moment. So now what we have is the following. So we have a mapping. There's a mapping that takes me from the three-dimensional object to its two-dimensional projections, which I called as the forward mapping. And then there is a backward mapping, or the inverse mapping, that takes me from the two-dimensional projection data to the three-dimensional object. So the forward projection or the forward transform is called the radon transform. Don't worry about it. I'm just telling you. And the backward transform that helps me estimate this mu xy from this projection data is called the backward transform. So if these two transforms do not exist, I cannot solve my inverse problem. So again, the forward problem is what is happening in nature. So this is the forward problem, that the three-dimensional object are causing 2D shadows. So there is some function, there's some transform, which is the forward transform. Now I want to reconstruct the object from these projections, and that is what we call as the backward transform. So in 1917, an Austrian mathematician by the name of Johann Radon proposed this radon transform that has made this medical imaging a reality now. So I wanted to mention this thing just to show you the importance of mathematics also, that without this mathematical object called radon transform, this thing is not possible. So again, you have an engineering aspect, which is basically the setup. Then what is your setup, experimental setup? And similarly, what sort of source you have to use? What is the intensity of that source that you have to use? So that brings the physics component to it. And this radon transform brings the mathematical aspect to it. And combining these three ingredients has made medical imaging possible as to what we see now. So now I'm going to show you this thing as a demonstration. So this is the original phantom. So think about this object that we have here. And you can think of this as a patient, which is lying in a CT scanner. Now, obviously, the doctor does not have access to this original image. क्योंकि अगर उसके पास ये access है, he doesn't need to do anything. He can just use that image and do his diagnosis. But what he has is basically this projection data. Now, if you see that on the y-axis, I have x, and on the x-axis, I have theta. So there are 360 bins on the x-axis, one for every orientation. And this column, so for every theta degree orientation, this whole column represents that one-dimensional projection. अगर आप ये देख रहे हैं यहाँ पर कि for a particular orientation of the source detector geometry, I have this one-dimensional projection profile. So this is your vector, a one-dimensional vector. तो मैंने 360 one-dimensional vectors इकट्ठा किए, one for each orientation, and I stack them in matrix form. Is it clear? Everybody is with me here? So 0 degrees के ऊपर मेरे पास एक one-dimensional profile आई. It's a vector of values. I stack them in a column. फिर मैंने इसको rotate किया by another degree. I got another vector. फिर मैंने इसे rotate किया. I get another vector. I stack them in this matrix, and this matrix is called my raw data. This is what your CT scanner actually estimates or collects or acquires. Not estimates, it acquires. So your acquisition is basically what we call as a sinogram, because it looks like a sine wave. Now, using this sinogram, I'm going to reconstruct the original object, and I'm going to show you this demo here now. So just a moment. So I have written this MATLAB code, which you can run at your end. So here is basically your reconstruction in action. So you can see we start with the projection data, which is this raw data here, the sinogram, and we reconstruct in an iterative fashion. So this is basically medical image reconstruction that is happening. This is how you reconstruct your CT data. This is how you reconstruct your PET data. And in a similar way, very, very close, this is how you reconstruct your MRI data that you have here. So anybody who has any questions about this for now? So this is called back projection or image reconstruction. Okay. And clearly you are seeing some artifacts. I don't know if you are able to see that online, but if you see there's some shading here, there's some streak artifacts here. So obviously the reconstruction is not absolutely perfect because I've not run it for a long time. I've not run it to convergence. So this is an estimate of your true image, and it is a pretty good estimate. Okay. Is it clear? Anybody who has any questions? Ji Qasim, puchiye.
Sir, in this medical reconstruction process, which is used in medical therapies, can we, like, if you're doing this MRI and the stuff which you told on different organs, can we like slice down those objects using this image? Like we.
Yes, I'm coming to that. We do that. We all, okay. So every reconstruction that is happening right now is a 3D reconstruction. ये सिर्फ समझाने के लिए आपको 2D हमने बात की, but the principles exactly apply in a similar way.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a 3D reconstruction, but this is a demo. It's a toy problem that I'm showing you here. Okay. All right. So now let's go back. Now this idea of reconstructing the 3D object or the 3D shape from its projection data is not just restricted to medical imaging or computer vision. It's found in shape theory, where you study the shapes from reflections and shadows. You use these concepts in pure and applied mathematics to solve partial differential equations and reconstruction of integrals. We also use them in radar imaging, in seismology, and there are many applications of this basic thing where we are doing 3D reconstruction from two-dimensional measurements. So the applications are huge. So any questions before I move forward to the main imaging modality that I want to explain? So anybody who has any questions? So the basic takeaway is we have an inverse problem. We have a two-dimensional set of measurements, and we want to reconstruct a three-dimensional object out of it. So that's what we want to do. All right. So now let's look at there are many imaging modalities, but let's focus on positron emission tomography, a nuclear medicine imaging modality, and I'm going to explain to you. So we have a host set of modalities, and they can be divided into two. One modality, which is shown in this green hemisphere, which only captures the structural image, which only gives me the structure of the organs, what I call as morphology. It just tells me that that organ has this anatomical shape, and it does not tell me anything about the physiology or the function of that organ. Only thing it gives me is basically the structural description or the morphological description of the organs. And these modalities are called CT, computed tomography, or magnetic resonance imaging, MRI imaging. On the other hand, in this red hemisphere, what we have is called functional modalities, like SPECT, single photon emission computed tomography, positron emission computed tomography, or optical coherence tomographies. These modalities tell me the underlying biology or physiology of the processes. But I need both. I not only need the physiology, I also need to know where is this physiology located. So this structural images, the CT and MR is going to give you the structural localization, and this is going to give you the functional description of these images. So this is where we have the need and the formation of multimodality imaging. And in multimodality imaging, we pair different modalities. We pick up a functional modality like PET with a CT, what we call as PET-CT imaging. We can take PET and MR, we call it PET-MR imaging. So the PET imaging gives you the functional description or physiology, and the CT or MR gives you the structural details. And both are very important. So now let's look at it in more detail here. Now, when I'm trying to capture, so I've already discussed that this is the setup of X-ray source that we need to get the CT images. In CT imaging, we want कि हमारे पास एक ऐसा setup हो where once the rays enter the object and they traverse this organ, they negotiate different anatomical regions with different structural properties, with different geometrical and material properties. I want those organs to attenuate my X-rays. So for that, my X-rays must be in a certain energy जो attenuate हो सकती हो. If I use a very strong X-ray source, it will just pass unscathed, unattenuated, and I'm not going to get anything. So in transmission tomography, what we call as CT imaging, the source is outside the object or outside the human body. And the source and the detector is fixed at every orientation. ये 0 degrees पे है तो ये position पे fix होगा, 90 degrees पे है तो उस position के ऊपर fix होगा. We use low energy X-rays ताकि वो attenuate हो सके. If you use very high energy sources, they won't be attenuated and you are not getting any meaningful signal. And with these three properties, what we end up is with anatomical images. And I'm going to show you a couple of images in a moment. On the other hand, if we look at functional images where the source is inside the human body. And I'm going to tell you how the source gets inside the human body in the next slide. This source inside the human body is a radioactive source. It emits particles, and therefore the source position is not fixed, because the radioactive particles could be all over the body in the circulatory system, in the circulation system. So wherever they are, they emit these radioactive particles, or they emit these radiation, and this radiation gets detected by this ring of detector, which is fixed in this case. Ab yahan par ye hai ki because I want to capture the physiology and not the anatomical property, I must use a high energy source, or in this case we use gamma rays. So I must have a source which emit high energy rays so that they do not get attenuated, and I am only getting the physiology out of it and not the anatomical attenuation. And what we end up in this case is with a functional image. So is it clear? Anybody who has any questions about this?
Sir, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sir, for this emission tomography, which you gave like an example of PET, you said that there's a already present source, radio source.
I'll tell you how it gets. Yeah, I'll tell you in a moment.
Okay, sir. Okay.
I'll tell you how the source gets inside the human body. But the source is all over the human body in the circulation system. It is emitting these gamma rays. वो gamma rays किस तरह emit करते हैं? I'll talk about it. But that is detected by this ring of detector. वो एक cylinder की तरह होता है. If many of you have seen the CT scanner or PET scanner, and therefore they collect this emissions, and through this data they reconstruct the object. Ji Aisha.
Sir, my question is that using gamma rays, is it dangerous?
No,
because
that's a great question. So X-rays are dangerous. So you cannot use high energy X-rays. So you have to maintain the level of doses. And you have this dosimetry that we do in clinical imaging, where we make sure that throughout the year, they should not have got beyond a fixed amount of radiation dose. But this gamma rays, they are not that dangerous.
Sir, our solo purpose for transmission tomography is to like get it annotated, or our purpose is to like send it at a lower X-ray?
No, we want to know the shape of the organ. For example, there could be a brain which has atrophy. An atrophy brain is deformed. Its shape is irregular. You have irregular hearts. So you only are interested in the shape of the object. So for that, you are going to do CT or MR imaging. But if you're trying to study the physiology of the tumors, the tumors के biological properties क्या है, physiological properties क्या है, you have to do PET imaging. Okay. So Daniel Holt, Ji.
So I was saying the reason why we are like setting an X-ray source at a very low frequency that it's not going so fast is to like annotate that an organ also like annotates, it lowers its frequency, or we just like sending it at a lower frequency so that our organ doesn't get like damaged?
Both. So the main need is we need to have low energy X-rays so that they get attenuated. Agar ek high energy beam hogi, it will pass. It won't get attenuated, and we are not going to get a meaningful signal. So although we want meaningful signal, but at the same time, we have to maintain the doses to a lower level also. So both.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Agar let's say if dose is not an issue, let's say if X-rays is not harmful. If you send a very strong X-ray, आपकी signal to noise ratio तो बहुत अच्छी होगी, but you're not getting anything because organs are not able to attenuate that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that is वो तो एक requirement है जो कि एक organic requirement है, intrinsic requirement है. But at the same time, X-rays are dangerous. They can damage your tissue. So you cannot have a high energy X-ray source. Okay. So now this is the sort of images that we get. So this red one is basically a structural image where you're only seeing the brain skull. And on the right, you are seeing the gray matter, the white matter, the caudate, the putamen, the ventricles, and all of that. So you see the functional regions of the brain. And on the left, you just see the structural regions of the brain. And this helps you, and you have to fuse these images. So they have to be registered so that we know that what is the function and which location is this function coming from. So you want to localize your signal to the source that you have. Ji Basit.
सर हम सीटी स्कैन करने से पहले वो बेरियम सल्फेट का सॉल्यूशन देते हैं पेशेंट को, तो इज इट फॉर द सेम पर्पस के उसके अंदर वो सोर्स
To be honest, this is the first time I'm hearing कि हम बेरियम सल्फेट का solution CT scan को क्यों देते हैं. I don't know. Contrast देते हैं, but I have never used barium sulfate. We use iodine contrast. I'm not sure कि barium sulfate का क्या काम है.
सर हम बस मैंने A level में I just read कि we give barium sulfate dilute solution to patient before CT scan.
For what? For what purpose?
So that we can identify the different organs of the body.
I'm not aware of that. This is the first time I'm hearing. We do contrast CT imaging. I'm talking about a no contrast imaging. But we do contrast, which is iodine. But I'm not sure about the barium sulfate thing. I have not read that. I'm sorry about that. Okay. So now let's see that how this source gets inside the human body. So you take a biological molecule, let's say water. You radio label it with a O15, which is unstable here. So this is a tracer that we use for blood flow. So we label it with O15, and what we do we inject this tracer into the patient. And once we inject this tracer into the patient, it circulates in the human body for a uniform distribution. Now remember, this is still radioactive. So this is radioactive. It wants to attain stability by radioactive decay. So what it does, it undergoes this positron emission. And when it emits this positron that we have here, this positron has some kinetic energy. It travels a small distance, doing molecular interactions. And it actually, once it meets an electron, because electron and positrons are oppositely charged, it annihilates and it emits these two gamma photons. And these two gamma photons are of 511 kilo electron volt energy. And they are emitted almost anti-parallel, almost at 180 degrees to each other. And then these gamma photons are emitted in pair, and we want to detect it using this ring of detectors around this subject. So what we do is we have these emissions happening throughout the human body, and we use this ring detector to detect these gamma photons, which are emitted from the same annihilation event, from the same annihilation that we have here. And they must be almost 180, they must make 180 degrees angle to each other. And this is what we call as a line of response. Okay, is it clear? So this is how the radioactive source enters the human body through injection. We radio label any molecule. यहाँ पे मैंने आपको एक water का example दिया है. We can do label a glucose molecule. भी हम कर सकते हैं. We have lots of tracers for us. But here I'm just giving you an example. And we usually use a molecule that is naturally present in the human body. And water is naturally present. We radio label it with O15. We inject it into the human body so that it circulates for uniform distribution. This nucleus is a radioactive nucleus. It's unstable. It will emit positron, which will traverse a certain distance. It will annihilate with this electron, and it will emit these two gamma photons. And these two gamma photons are almost emitted anti-parallel. And I have this line of response. And I can detect this line of response using this rings of detectors. Now, what we have an issue in this case is, हमें ये नहीं पता चलता इससे कि location कहाँ पर है. So basically, this radioactive molecule ये वहां जाके accumulate हो जाएगा जो कि tumor region है. Let's say ये जहाँ पे blood flow बहुत अच्छा नहीं हो रहा. For example, this radioactive radio-labeled source or a tracer is going to accumulate in the region of interest, and it is going to start emitting these gamma photons. And we want to identify where is the location of the tumor or where is the blockage. So what we need to know is ये जो line of response, this is very, very important. Now just think about this. If I start annotating, okay, let's say we start collecting these lines of response from multiple angles. Let's say एक ये आ गया हमारे पास, एक ये line of response आ गया, एक ये line of response आ गया, एक ये line of response आ गया. All of these, the drawing is not very good, but all these lines of responses that I collect from 360 degrees, they intersect at the point of annihilation, which tells me that the radioactive source was accumulated at that point. Okay, so this is how, by using these lines of response from multiple views, I can reconstruct the image, and therefore I can see what is the location of my tumor. Anybody who has any questions about this?
Sir, when you said that we have to like insert it through an injection, you meant there's always going to be an external stimulus when we are like testing it out.
Yes, obviously.
When it enters our body, like it goes, this biological molecules that travels through your blood channel and it like gets attached to that molecule, which is like being accumulated and a tumor is being formed. So that tumor is stagnant somewhere in the blood flow, or is
No,
it
no,
like
no.
more?
Sorry. Tumor is not being formed. Tumor is already inside the patient. The doctor doesn't know where is the tumor. Is it a liver tumor? Is it is a brain tumor? Is it a pancreatic tumor? We need to find the location of the tumor. तो हम उस organ को image करते हैं, and that region which gets the most contrast or intensity, we say that that's the tumor region. Let me give an example. Let me simplify this thing. अगर आपको पता करना हो कि water की जो extreme है वो कहाँ जा रही है, you will pour a dye, a colored dye, and wherever the color goes, it tells you that this is the path the stream is following. That's exactly what we are doing. We radio label a molecule, we insert it into the bloodstream, and this molecule has a high affinity for tumor regions. Let's say for tumor regions. तो ये वहां जाके accumulate हो जाएगा जहां पे tumor है, जहां पे abnormal activity हो रही है. And because it is accumulating in that region, it is going to start emitting these anti-parallel gamma photons from that region, and I can reconstruct because the maximum signal is coming from that region.
And it doesn't, at the very same moment, it is not able to judge that what is the size of the tumor. It's just like giving you the direction that whether the tumor exists in your brain.
जब आप image reconstruct करेंगे, then you are going to do this volumetric measurements. So what is the size of the tumor? What is the shape of the tumor? Is the tumor uniform? It is heterogeneous? Is it aspherical? वो सारे जो features हैं, once you have the image. अभी तो हमें पता ही कुछ नहीं है. So right now, हमें तो shape ही नहीं पता ना. So we need to have some data, some image of the object before we start talking about. If अगर मैं आपसे कहूँ कि मेरे पास एक object है, मुझे आप उसका shape बताइए. It's an unsolved problem. आप कहेंगे मुझे तो उस object के बारे में कुछ पता ही नहीं है. तो मैं कैसे बता सकता हूँ? So the point is we are creating that image right now. Okay?
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
जी सुमेरा इजाज.
सर सुमेर इजाज है नाम.
Oh sorry, I'm really sorry. वो मैं सिर्फ दूसरे कंप्यूटर पे देख रहा था. Sorry.
कोई नहीं. सर लाइन ऑफ रिस्पांस क्या होती है?
Line of response is basically okay. It's जब ये gamma photons emit हो रहे हैं, they are emitting almost exactly at 180 degrees. So एक photon यहाँ पे detect हो रहा है, एक photon यहाँ पे detect हो रहा है. I must detect two photons in coincidence. So there is a timing circuitry which says that any photon which is detected within nanoseconds, it should have come from the same annihilation event. So this is called a line of response. ये जो आप orange line देख रहे हैं. And with these red lines, I have drawn multiple lines of response. And once I have this right, जी
नहीं आप बोलें.
नहीं आप पूछिए.
मैंने पूछना था हम फिगर आउट कैसे करते हैं कि कौन मतलब किधर हम लाइन ऑफ रिस्पांस हम इस तरह से ड्रॉ करें.
मैं आ रहा हूँ उसके ऊपर.
ठीक.
तो आइडली स्पीकिंग अभी मैंने आपको ये बताया है कि अगर मिसाल के तौर पर हमारे पास लेट्स से कि सिर्फ यही चीज है कि जब ये दो एंटी पैरेलल गामा फोटॉन्स निकले तो एक यहाँ पे डिटेक्ट हुआ, एक यहाँ पे डिटेक्ट हुआ इन अ वेरी प्रिसाइज टाइमिंग विंडो. Okay, and we said that this is the line of response. Now let's say I get another line of response like this one. Okay, because these are emitting in random directions. This is, for example, another line of response. I collect all of these lines of responses, and where they intersect is basically that activity. And I can use this वो जो मैंने अभी आपको वीडियो दिखाई थी, that is what is happening. Iteratively, we use these line of responses or projection data from multiple views, and we somehow stitch them together to create the 3D image. अब वो किस तरह होता है, that is too much advanced at this level. But just अभी बस मेरी इस बात का यकीन करने कि इस तरह हम कर सकते हैं. And I'll answer your question in a moment. So ये हमारे पास setup है यहाँ पर. And the image that we get is something like that. So that's your functional image of the brain. So you see, this is the caudate and putamen. You see the ventricles, you see the gray and white matter. So that's the functional image of the brain, which you call as a PET image. In this case, you get PET modality. अब problem ये है कि हमें ये जो lines of response है, they must be representing two annihilation photons, emitted almost at 180 degrees. But, and again, I'll skip the math, but there could be many different things that can stop us. So for example, this was my true line of response. So this was basically two gamma photons emitted at 180 degrees. But what could be something that could stop us from? It could be scattering. So when I scatter, let's say one of the gamma photon gets scattered, and instead of being detected exactly at 180 degrees, it got detected here. So I misread the line of response. So the actual line of response was this orange line, but what I get is the red line. This is going to degrade my image. Then what I have random events. Maybe I have two annihilations happening at two different points. इसका जो gamma pair था वो lose हो गया, इसका ये वाला gamma pair lose हो गया, but at the same time window I detected this gamma photon and this gamma photon. So I created a line of response, red, which was not even there. Again, this is an incorrect measurement, and this is going to degrade my image. So I need to correct for that. Then all the detectors that I have, even if they are coming from the same manufacturing company, they don't have the same sensitivity. So they are going to introduce some measurement errors into my measurement. So I need to correct for that. My detector needs some time to process the data. So जो मेरे पास इतने ज़्यादा gamma photons आ रहे हैं, I cannot process them in real time. I need to pause for a small amount of time, which I call as the detector dead time. At this time, the detector is only processing the signal that it has received, and it is dead to any other signal that is coming in real time. So this reduces your signal to noise ratio, and your image becomes noisier. Then you have radioactive decay. So as your radioactive source is decaying, your signal strength is decaying with time. That is also generating noise. Then actually तो आपका radioactive substance यहाँ पर accumulate हुआ था, पर क्योंकि positron के अंदर kinetic energy होती है, it travels a certain distance and it gets annihilated here. So the actual position of the tumor was this one, which is denoted by this nucleus, but it was detected slightly 1 to 2 millimeters on the right, for example. This is called positron range. So you are losing your spatial resolution. Similarly, the photons are never emitted exactly at 180 degrees. They're emitted with a plus minus 0.4 or 0.5 degree angle. So there's a slight change in the line of response that happens, and we need to correct for that. And again, I won't talk about other degradation factors, but there's so many degradation factors that I need to actually correct for that. I want to mention one more thing. One is the attenuation. So once this gamma photon actually leaves, enters the human body, leaves the human body, it is on its path, it is getting interacted, it is meeting with the organs, and it is also getting attenuated. So we use the CT image जो हमने acquire किया है to restore the strength of this line of response. So ये जो gamma photon हमारे पास यहाँ पर emit हो रहा है, for example, इस case के अंदर ये जो gamma photon यहाँ पर emit हुआ था इधर, while as it is traversing the human body, it gets attenuated before it leaves the human body. So उस attenuation factor को मुझे correct करना है using the CT map जो मैंने acquire किया यहाँ पे. That's also an issue. Then what we have is patient motion. These scans last from 60 to 120 minutes. A patient cannot stay still for that duration of time. What if the patient has some neurological disorders? For example, he's epileptic, he has seizures, or he has Parkinson's, or he has some restless leg syndrome, or he's coughing and all of that. So I'm showing you here that this is the CT scan. This is the image of the brain when a subject is not moving his brain. And here are the images of the brain where the person has done motion in a 5-minute scan. And you can clearly see this caudate and putamen are completely morphed. And there are a lot of artifacts in this image. So I need to correct for that. So patient motion is also very, very important that I need to correct for. Then if you're talking about cardiac imaging, in cardiac imaging, you have this cardiac motion that is happening. And you need to correct for cardiac motion also, because that is also introducing this blurring effect. ये उसी तरह से है कि जिस तरह आप एक सेल्फी अपने मोबाइल से ले रहे हैं, and if your hand is jittering, is moving, the image will be blurred. So you don't want this motion to actually corrupt your image or blur your image. So this cardiac motion and respiratory motion, both these non-rigid aperiodic motions are actually introducing artifacts in your image. So basically what we have to do, we have to correct for all these factors so that we get a good quality image before a doctor can make any proper diagnosis, because you don't want to misconstrue a physiological signal with an artifact. Now this kind of image, you can see similar images for Parkinson's subject, but this is not a Parkinson's subject. It's a normal subject, and its caudate and putamen is morphed because of patient motion. So you have to correct for all these factors. G, so anybody who has questions?
So when we are doing this PET imaging, and there's some sort of a as far as I got it, there's some sort of a ray that is coming from that machine, and it's like that organ or that tumor where these positrons or etc. are like accumulated. So when it is like passing through the organ, isn't it like going to be deviated to a greater range?
Yes, that is happening. That is what we call as scatter events. You have to correct for that. That is what I said. That's a deviation.
How would we know that this is the amount of that like deflection.
Yeah, we measured that, but again, that's beyond the scope. We measured that. So people have worked their PhD thesis on this one, developing algorithms where we correct for scatter correction, random correction, renormalizing the detector sensitivity, accounting for detector dead time. Radioactive decay is pretty straightforward. How do we come up with positron range and stuff like that? So there are elaborate techniques, but this is beyond the scope of this course for now, for this lecture right now. So all I want to tell you is the following. All I'm trying to tell you, just acquiring an image is not enough for diagnosis. So once you have acquired an image, which is some sort of this image, which is completely morphed, you have to correct for patient motion. How do we correct? You have to read my thesis for that one. Then how do we correct for patient motion? For example, brain motion. So these are all images from my thesis. So we correct for this brain motion. We use external markers to actually evaluate this brain motion using some cap where you have fixed some retroreflective spheres. And as the brain moves, you can measure the motion. But again, you have methods for that. But now the point is, once you have this raw image that you have reconstructed, this raw image has a lot of artifacts. It has a lot of issues that is going on with this image. And I need to enhance this image without damaging the intrinsic physiological signal. I don't want to introduce a new signal. मैं कोई artifact create नहीं करना चाहता. I want to reduce artifacts and I want to preserve my physiological signal, restore the quality of the image so that I can make a good diagnosis. And this is what all image processing is all about. Because you cannot ask a patient to remain still for 120 minutes. आप उसको hand tie नहीं कर सकते. Okay, so you can't do these kind of things. So for this longer duration of scans, you have to come up with some mathematical solutions, computational solutions that address these kind of problems. So hopefully I've motivated you what medical imaging is and what are the issues and open problems that we have here. Any questions for now before we switch to the task of today's lab? Anybody who has any questions?
So just to get a clear idea, what we're talking about is basically kind of like we have those optical image stabilizers. So what you're saying is that we track the motion of the patient, yes, and then according to that we adjust our images to, yes, prevent the okay. And like generally these machines are really expensive in you, yes, know, hospitals, yes, and stuff. So is there something like we can do to bring down those costs, like maybe local manufacturing of these machines or something?
Okay, so there are people who are working on the instrumentation side of it. I'm not an instrumentation person, but yet even if you bring down the cost, still they are expensive. So what we are trying to do is there are some standardized scanners that people have actually proposed the world over, and we are using these scanners. For example, at Shaukat Khanum, your PET time of flight scanner, which from Philips, I worked on that scanner, which is a very, very new scanner. But what is important is basically computational algorithms. And you've answered a very interesting question. You cannot say that, okay, I'll come up with a better machine. Again, remember this thing. You cannot keep on bringing the cost down because there is some base cost that has to be satisfied. Because if you try to bring the cost down, you are going to use very poor technologies or instruments, and the image will have much more artifacts that you cannot even correct for them. So there are some base price that you have to follow, base standards that you have to follow the world over. But beyond that, this is where machine learning, mathematics, physics, medical physics, more importantly, and optimization, and all these tools that we study in electrical engineering, that is what teaches us. So we learn math, like for example, how good is an image? How do you decide goodness of an image? You need some metrics for that. You need some quality metrics for that. So that's basically image quality, which is a field in its own. How do you actually correct for motion? That's a motion correction approach. So there are people who have written PhD theses on motion correction that we were talking about. Then a novel way of reconstructing images with low dose. How do you do that? What we call as low dose image reconstruction. There is a separate field for that one. So we are all working on these kind of things, but the solution is not to replace a scanner. Because agar iski ek aur baat hai, so I'll tell you from an example. If I go to Hopkins and I say, I can give you a new scanner now, they're not interested in that. They already have plenty of scanners on which they have invested millions of dollars. They can't put them to waste. But if another student goes to them and they say, you give me your raw image, for example, these images that I'm showing you, and my mathematical approach or computational algorithm is going to enhance them, they are going to embrace it. That idea. So that's what we actually do. Okay.
Yes,
all right.
Sir, I get that. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Anybody else who has a question on this one? So again, the point is that the images that we acquire, they have a lot of artifacts, blurring, noise, distortion, motion artifacts, and lots of those things. We have to correct for all of these before we can make a meaningful diagnosis for the patient. All right. Okay, so that's about it from for this introduction on medical imaging. Now I would like if all of you have access to that MATLAB file that I had shared. So Hamza, have you shared it? Hamza or Isha, if they can answer.
So Hassan, he's uploading the file. You want him to upload the script, right?
The script. Just so that they can access them at their end.
He'll go ahead and upload. Perhaps you can share your screen.
I've done. I'm already. It's already shared. Yeah. So let me just go ahead and let me just try to increase the font.
So he's doing it as we speak.
Sure. Okay. So now I've written this MATLAB script, and again, MATLAB, hopefully you have gone through. It's a very, very important software, and I'm going to stress that this is a must for all electrical engineers to know about MATLAB. You should know about a lot of softwares, and although this is not the point, but I'll just share my 2 cents of wisdom here. You should know MATLAB, you should know Python once you graduate, and preferably I would also recommend that you learn R language for statistical analysis. So these are the 3 softwares I would, or languages I would advise you to master once you graduate in 4 years' time, inshallah. So now what we have, so MATLAB, as the name suggests, it's matrix laboratory, and it is tailor-made for all the mathematical operations that involves matrix vector products or matrix vector operations. Let me say that. That's what we say, matrix laboratory, and you short it in an acronym called MATLAB. So whatever mathematical operation you can matricize, if I can use that word, it will be super fast in MATLAB. And MATLAB is one of the, I would say, is the best help library of any software that I've seen so far. It has the most simple and the most effective help library of all the softwares that I personally know. Maybe scikit-learn is going to beat that, but I still stand with MATLAB. It's very, very profound and very helpful. And it has a very deep and extensive image processing toolbox that I'm going to show you in a moment. So what you have been shared with are 2 things. There's a data set, and on data set you have been shared, aapko ye images share honge. These are grayscale images. And these are the images that we use to evaluate our computational algorithms that we actually develop in different, in computer vision, medical imaging, and image processing. So there's an image of a Barbara. You can see there's a lot of texture. There are a lot of objects in this image. There are some corners, sharp corners, horizontal edges, vertical edges. There's a pattern in the scarf. So these are some structural or textural properties that you want to preserve. Let's look at this butterfly. Again, it's a grayscale image. And again, you can see that there is a lot of structure and pattern to this. And we want to have an algorithm which can actually preserve these patterns. These are original images, by the way. These are clean images. Similarly, this is a camera image. You can see this elbow. So there's a rounded edge here. You can see another shoulder edge here, which is rounded. You can see some background. You can see some uniform grass. You can see some uniform sky. You can see these tall buildings in the background. So these are some structures which are hidden in the image. We want to preserve that. And similarly, we have, that's it? No, there are more. Okay. So similarly, we have this image of house, and this is the image that I'm going to use for my demonstration. And again, it has a lot of edges. So you have slant edges, vertical edges, horizontal edges. You want to reconstruct this window very, very properly so that you have a clear contrast. And this is the image that we are going to use to demonstrate. Okay. So now I'll switch to my MATLAB and I'll go to the scripts one by one. So the first thing I always do for a fresh start is close all. It closes any figures or plotting figures that I've opened. Clear all actually clears my workspace. So this is basically my workspace here. Any variables, if I just say W equals 2, you can see there's a variable here. And if I just say clear all, it clears every variable here. And if I do CLC, it clears my screen. So I always do for a fresh start this thing. Now what I've done, I like to define the parameters at the top. Many students actually in their coding, they define the parameters at the very end, which I don't appreciate. I think all the parameters should be defined on the top. So this is the main path of the folder. And then from the main path, I've mentioned that my data set is basically in this folder data set. So I use the string concatenate command, string cat, and it concatenates the main path. So basically, iska answer aapke samne kuch is tarah ka aa jayega. It concatenates it. So I hope you have seen this command for now. So this data path actually concatenates the main path with the folder name here. अब यहाँ पर मैंने उसे बता दिया कि मुझे हाउस इमेज चाहिए क्योंकि हाउस उस इमेज का नाम है. If you see in the data set, so the name of the file is house here. And the extension is .png. It's a portable graphics format that I'm using, that network graphics format that I'm using here. और ये मैंने सिर्फ टाइटल देने के लिए उस फिगर्स को मैंने कह दिया कि this is an image of a house. That's just my display name. So I've defined the parameters कि मेरा फोल्डर, मेन फोल्डर कहाँ पर है, किस डेटा पाथ कहाँ से, जहां से मैंने डेटा रीड करना है, और मैंने कौन सा इमेज रीड करना है, वो मैंने उसे बता दिया कि read house.png. So the first thing I need to do is I need to know how to read the image. And the beauty of MATLAB is that if you know English, you know MATLAB. क्योंकि C++ में आपको बहुत ज्यादा syntax सीखना पड़ता है, जैसे IOStream, CON.io. These are the terms that you don't even hear in normal routine life in communication. But here you are going to say that I want to read an image. The command is imread. Im is for image, read is for reading. You provide it the path. So उसमें आपने data path दे दिया, image name .png, क्योंकि आपने extension भी दे दिया. It will read that image. So if I just run this file for now, you will see here कि यहाँ पर अब मेरे पास data path आ गया concatenate होकर, तो यहाँ पे मेरा data पड़ा हुआ है, और यहाँ पर मेरे पास एक image आ गया है, and if I compute the size of the image, it's a matrix 256 times 256. So a signal is a one-dimensional function, an image is a two-dimensional object. So it's a matrix. और इसके अंदर 256 rows हैं और 256 columns हैं. And if I just show you the first 10 rows and 10 columns, sorry. So these are just some real numbers that we have assigned to it. और अगर आप यहाँ पर workspace में देखें तो इसकी data type है unsigned integer 8. So that's the data type that we are using. So these are not floating point values, these are integer values that we are using. So once we have read the image, we can convert them to floating point values by using this double operation. So I just do double image. So if I just do that here, so image equals double image, you will see that now the format immediately changes to double. So now it has been changed into a double floating point values. Okay, that's what you usually do. And now अगर मैं देखना चाहूँ कि इस image के अंदर maximum value या minimum value क्या है, I can do very simply. I can say maximum image. This is going to vectorize the image. So that's 239. If I do minimum, it is 16. So the minimum intensity of any point on the image is 16 units, and the maximum intensity is 239 units. And usually what we do, not always, but usually what we do, we want to normalize it between 0 to 1. तो आप ये क्या करते हैं, because here वो जो मैंने आपको एक handout दिया, so try to read it at your time. So usually when you have images, they are quantized between the range 0 to 255. So 256 gray levels, which is 2 to the power 8. So we quantize them into 8 levels, and we have actually 256 different quantization levels of the image. So the minimum value will be 0, the maximum will be 255. So what we do is we divide it by the maximum value 255. हालांकि मैक्सिमम यहाँ पे 255 नहीं है, पर जो इस रिप्रेजेंटेशन जिसकी हम बात कर रहे हैं उसके अंदर मैक्सिमम वैल्यू 255 होनी चाहिए, मिनिमम वैल्यू 0 होनी चाहिए. 0 is for absolutely background, जहाँ पे इंटेंसिटी 0 है, and 255 is, let's say, white light. So you can think of black region as 0 and white region as 255, something like that. तो मैंने क्या किया, उस इमेज को डिवाइड कर दिया by 255. So I just said image divided by 255, and now if I see the maximum value again, it is 0.9373. If I look at the minimum value, it is 0.0627. So my dynamic range of intensities, जो पहले 16 से लेकर 239 तक थी, it has now been compressed between 0 and 1. So this is how we read an image. We change it to floating point values, and then we normalize it between 0 and 1. So anybody who has any questions up till now? Ji Aisha.
Sir, why didn't we divide by 256 and why?
Because we start counting from 0. So it's 0 from 255. So total is 256.
Okay.
There are 256 levels at which we are breaking the image intensity range. We are quantizing them just like your stairs. So अगर आप counting की पहली stair को आप 0 कह रहे हो, तो last stair will be 255.
Where is MATLAB indexed from? Is it indexed from 0 or 1?
Yeah, MATLAB is indexed from 1, Python is indexed from 0, but this is not about MATLAB. This is the way this image has been coded. ये उसकी बात हो रही है. इसका MATLAB से ताल्लुक नहीं है, इसका image के से ताल्लुक है. Okay? जिस कैमरा से या जिस डिवाइस से हमने ये इमेज को सेव किया है, जिस फॉर्मेट में हमने सेव किया है, उस फॉर्मेट में मिनिमम इंटेंसिटी 0 होती है, मैक्सिमम इंटेंसिटी 255 होती है. ओके
Okay, sir.
okay all right. So again, अब आप at this point you should not be worrying about too many details. Right now you should see कि भाई एक command है जिससे हम image read कर रहे हैं, and usually we normalize it between 0 and 1. That's it. Okay, so that's what we have, because this is something which you are going to read when you study more of image processing. अब जब हमने ये image load कर लिया, now I want to see this image. So again, I am read, the command is I am show. So I define figure 1. Subplot commands आप लोगों को पता है? Are you familiar with subplots? Moment, are they familiar with subplots?
No, they're not.
Okay. So मैं आपको, I think I can explain very quickly the subplot to you. So since I said, in fact, let me just.
So Hassan, it's okay if they even do this in separate figures.
ठीक है. Okay. Okay, ठीक है. So what I do is I use I am show command. So let me just run this thing now. So for example, let me say figure 1. So I created figure 1 here. That's figure 1. And let me say I am show image. तो यहाँ पर मेरे पास वो image of the house आ गया मेरे पास. So I can visualize an image. It's a 2D image. अब मुझे ये नहीं पता यहाँ पर किसकी minimum intensity, maximum intensity क्या है. I call a command which I call as color bar, and it gives me the color bar here, which tells you that I'm going from 0 to 1. Okay, so ये चीज यहाँ पर आ गई. So I see this image in front of me, which is the original image that I have. Okay, so that's what we have here. अब यहाँ पर मैं चाहता हूँ कि I want to, लेकिन अब मुझे तो नहीं, let's say मुझे नहीं पता कि हर image की dynamic range मुख्तलिफ है. Instead of me normalizing every image or computing the min max for every one, if I want that the image should be displayed with its own intrinsic scale, I will use I am show image comma this empty matrix here, because this means that you have to adjust the scale automatically, and I'll show you with the color bar. Otherwise, अगर आप चाहते हैं कि image को मैं सिर्फ 0.3 से लेके 0.7 तक show करूं, so you are going to provide a minimum intensity value, a lower bound, and an upper bound here. So if I show you that if I run this thing here, this is what we are going to see here. So that's what you're seeing. So this is without scaling. That's the original image, जो 0 से 1 तक था. पर आपने देखा कि हमारे पास 1 तो इंटेंसिटी है ही नहीं, हमारे पास इंटेंसिटी थी 0.93 समथिंग. तो उसने फिर उसको रीस्केल किया और 0 भी कोई नहीं थी हमारे पास वैल्यू. So if you go back and we see the minimum value was 0.0627 and the maximum value was 0.937. तो उसने ऑटोमेटिकली उसको कलर बार को उस हिसाब से एडजस्ट कर दिया. और यहां पर मैंने कहा कि नहीं, only show me from 0.3 to 0.7, and you can clearly see that the contrast is changing. So this is the first example of how we can change the contrast of the image just by changing or playing with the dynamic range of its intensity values while we are displaying the image. Okay, is it clear? So so now मैं subplot का मैं quickly बता दूं. जिस तरह मैंने कहा है कि हर चीज MATLAB के अंदर matrix को follow करती है. So think of this whole screen as a matrix. How many columns are you seeing? Can anybody tell me how many columns are you seeing? There are 3 columns. Without scaling, scaling for display, specific range. And there is 1 row. So you have divided this entire figure into 1 row and 3 columns. So that's basically your subplot 1, 3. Okay? And this will be image 1, image 2, image 3. So that is what we have. So ये पहली 2 subplot की entries आपको ये बता रही हैं कि आपका जो पूरी figure है, it's a matrix, आप उन्हें कितने blocks में divide करना चाहते हो. तो हमने कहा उसे 1 row और 3 column में divide करो, तो वो हमने कर लिया. तो ये हमारे पास 3 boxes आ गए. और अब मैंने कहा कि अगर इसमें यहाँ पर आपने draw करना है, this is the first box, this is the second box, and this is the third box. So using this command, I can use image show to actually display my image. And this is just to put the title. /BF is for bold font. You can see that the font is bold here. And this is just to adjust the font size. So again, these are just some commands that I'll leave it for you to actually play with. So this is the first set of commands that I've talked about, that once you have read the image, how do you display that grayscale image on MATLAB? Okay. So now let's say that we want to display the color image. So for color image, I'm going to use image SC command. और मैं image जो मेरा IMG है, जो मैंने read किया, उसको मैं plot करूंगा. It is going to use the intensities to derive the color map. और ये color axis अगर आप कलर बार, तो सिर्फ कलर बार शो करती है। सी एक्सिस ये बताता है कि मिनिमम वैल्यू क्या होनी चाहिए, मैक्सिमम वैल्यू क्या होनी चाहिए। कलर बार भी आ गया, और एक्सेस ऑफ में अब आपको जल्दी जल्दी ये चीजें बता देता हूँ। अगेन इट्स प्रीटी सिंपल। So if I just now go to figure 2, for example, I create a new figure, I do image SC image. So clearly this is the colored image that you are seeing of the image that we have. आप ये axis देख रहे हैं. If I want to switch off this axis, I will say axis off. The axis is gone. Now if I just say कि इसको 0 और 1 के दरमियान कर दो, जो तो उसने इसको 0 और 1 के दरमियान कर दिया, पर कलर बार नहीं शो की। कलर बार शो करने के लिए I will actually call color bar here. So that's what we have. So this is the color image that I have shown using this built-in command, which we call as image SC. This is for color axis. This is for the color bar. And if you want to switch off the axis, if you don't want to show. So here we are showing you how can you actually plot a grayscale image as a color image. Okay. Is it clear? Anybody who has any questions so far? All right. So the next thing I'm going to see is how can I binarize my image? So there is this command image to black and white. और मैं उसे threshold दे देता हूँ. और ये threshold intensity threshold है. वो कहता है कि what all the pixels which have an intensity lower than this, उसको 0 कर दो. Whichever is greater than this, उसको 1 कर दो. So if I actually run this command, it is going to binarize my image. So here is your black and white image. So everything which was less than 0.5 is given 0. Everything which is greater than 0.5 or equal to 0.5, it is assigned 1. And this binarization is very, very important in segmentation, in various image processing tasks that we have. Okay, so a very, very simple command, image to black and white. So that's the name of the command. Okay, so that's what we have. अब मैं ये आपको बताना चाहता हूं कि यूजुअली जिस तरह मेडिकल इमेजिंग के अंदर होते हैं, ये तो टॉय एग्जांपल्स, द इमेजेस आर वेरी ह्यूज and they occupy a lot of space. So what you want to compress your images without sacrificing quality. Okay, that is very, very important. So अब यहाँ पर मैं आपको शो कर रहा हूँ कि जिस तरह I am read था, यहाँ पर अब कमांड है I am write. This is to write an image. So what I do is I say a low quality, इसको मैं एक नाम दे देता हूँ कि इस नाम से इसको सेव करो in a JPEG format. And when I'm writing, I can say इसको quality एक attribute है जो I am write के अंदर मौजूद है. And if the quality factor is close to 0, it is a low quality image, which means a lot of compression. और अगर यहाँ पे एक quality factor close to 100 है, it means कि you're not compressing too much, so you're preserving quality. And I'm going to show you once we actually run it कि इनकी quality पे कितना फर्क पड़ रहा है. So जब आप ये run करते हैं, तो आपके पास एक low quality house और एक high quality house images में save हो जाएगा, और फिर मैं उसको जो है रीड करके उसको मैं प्लॉट कर रहा हूं यहां पर इधर. So if I plot it now, so this is what I'm going to see now. So clearly you can see कि जो low quality थी, जैसे बहुत ज्यादा compression हो रही थी, you see a lot of artifacts here. And if you see on the right, it's a low compression. यहाँ पे मैंने ज्यादा compress नहीं किया, so my quality has not degraded. And high compression means कि अगर आप इसकी फाइल का साइज चेक करेंगे, it will be something like 2 kilobytes. This will be probably 4 times more. So low compression will occupy more space, but without degrading quality. High compression will actually reduce the file size to a very small amount, but at the cost of image quality. And this is an open question that how can we come up with interesting algorithms where we compress without sacrificing image quality. So that's what we have, which is again a very, very important problem that we have. So anybody who has any questions, I just call this quality attribute of I am right, and I just say कि इसको 5 कौन सा level, it's between 0 and 100, and close to 0 means low quality, high compression. Close to 100 means high quality and low compression that we have. Okay, so that's what we actually see in this one. Then we have some other transformations that we can do. What if I want to rotate my image by some degree? So I can just call I am rotate. I give it the image और कितने डिग्री से रोटेट करना है, 45, 90, 180 and so on and so forth. So these transformations are very, very important in computer vision and medical imaging. And again यहाँ पे मैं सिर्फ rotation आपको show कर रहा हूँ. Translation is a little bit complicated, so I won't be going through that, but that's what we have here. So in this case, your image is rotated by 45 degrees. Here it is rotated by 90 degrees, and here it is rotated by 180 degrees. So you can change the orientation of the image as you like using these simple commands that we have. Okay, and again, this will be subplot 1, 3, 1, subplot 1, 3, 2, subplot 1, 3, 3. So that's what I'm using. So I can also use the imRotate command to rotate my image. So anybody who has any questions so far? Again, just play with these commands. Don't overthink कि इसके पीछे algorithm क्या है, because that's too early to actually talk about those algorithms, right? Then what I can also do is कि जो मेरे पास images आते हैं, maybe उनके अंदर let's say वो ऐसी lighting conditions में acquire हुए हों which was not very good. So my images are darker and I need to enhance the contrast. I need to adjust the intensity level. One technique that we do is called gamma correction. So we use the IM adjust. So similar. So reading के लिए IM read, writing के लिए IM write, show करने के लिए IM show. If I have to adjust an image, I will call IM adjust. ये उसका format है, मैं image यहाँ पे provide करूँगा. ये आपकी दो entries जो है ये empty होनी चाहिए. So और यहाँ पर मैंने उसे gamma correction factor दे दिया. It has to be, it can be anything greater than 0. यहाँ पर मैं IM dark में मैं उसको less than 1 दे रहा हूँ और यहाँ पर मैं उसे greater than 1 factor दे रहा हूँ. So let's just see these commands and run that. So this is your original image. Clearly with this gamma correction, you can see this image is brighter. So इसका मैंने थोड़ी सी lighting conditions improve की हैं, and this image is darker that we have. Okay, that's what we are. That is what gamma correction actually does. And we use this gamma correction even in my research, which I'm doing on image segmentation. So what we do is, let's say कि एक patient ने MRI scan अपना acquire करा शौकत खानम में, कुछ अरसे बाद उसने किसी और scanner पे करवाया, कुछ अरसे कहीं और करवाया. Now these scans will have different intensities and it will be difficult to compare them directly. So it's better to adjust them somehow so that my learning algorithm do not mistake a change in lighting conditions with my physiology. So I usually do this, we usually do this gamma correction when we are training our deep learning artificial intelligence algorithms. And this is a very routine approach that we actually use. So again, we have IM adjust, the command image. We just have, this is just the format, so don't worry about these empty brackets. And we just give it the gamma factor here that we have here. Okay. All right. Then there is no image processing without probability. So I want to know what sort of histograms my images have. So अब मैं यहाँ पर आपको show करना चाहता हूँ कि जो अभी मैंने gamma correction से dark और bright उसकी lighting conditions की थी, what kind of impact it makes with the histogram. So let me show you. So I use the IM hist command. So image histogram, again, simple command. So IM for image, hist is for the histogram, and I just provided the image. जिसका मुझे histogram बनाना है. और उसने मुझे एक histogram उसका दे दिया. So on the x-axis, you have the intensities from 0 to 1. And on the y-axis, you have the frequencies. के इतने pixels, so for example, 0.3 के ऊपर जो peak आ रही है, इतने pixels की value is of 0.3. So this is your intensity of the original image. But अगर मैं अब आपको उस dark image की, sorry, इस image की मैं आपको उसकी histogram दिखाऊं, so what I get is the following. So now if you just compare these two figures, so on the left, you have the original histogram, and on the right, you have the modified histogram. So when you gamma corrected your image, your histogram also changed. So the original histogram was more centralized. On the right, when you did the gamma correction for the bright image, it is more skewed towards the right. Okay, so your histogram is also changing. Similarly, if I show you the darker image here, I can show you the histogram that is left skewed, that is more skewed towards the left. So using this IM hist command, I can also plot the histogram of the images that we have here. और इसकी application medical imaging में इतनी profound है कि I just can't tell you. So what we want, if I'm, let's say कि मेरे पास 100 patients का data है, different patients, and they all have brain tumors, and I want to compare, I want to tease out some common knowledge of the tumor from these 100 patient scans. But every patient had an MRI scan acquired from different scanners, तो उनकी अपनी intensity variability है. तो मैं क्या करता हूँ कि I want to readjust all the images so that they have the same reference histogram, ताकि मैं उस reference histogram के साथ उसे compare कर सकूं. So I can use the IM adjust command to actually do the gamma correction, and then I can check the histogram using the IM hist command. Okay, is that clear? सिमिलरली जब मैं इन हिस्टोग्राम्स को देखता हूं तो मैं ये देख रहा हूं फॉर एग्जांपल ओरिजिनल इमेज के अंदर, सॉरी, कि यहां पे जो पिक्सल्स हैं, for example, I see big peaks and big lobes here. So there's a more density of pixels in this intensity from, let's say, 0.28 to 0.5. And there are a lot of pixels which have very poor representation. And let's say I want to assign a uniformity to that. So main usko, which is what we call as histogram equalization. So I can just call hist EQ. So hist is for histogram, EQ is for equalization. और मैं उसे कहता हूं कि इन सबको 64 बिन्स के अंदर तकसीम कर दो ऑफ इक्वल रिप्रेजेंटेशन. तो मेरे पास जो इमेज इंटेंसिटी है वो 0 से 1 तक है. इसको मैंने 64 बिन्स में डिवाइड कर दिया और मैंने उनकी इंटेंसिटीज को इस तरह एडजस्ट किया कि फॉर एवरी बिन आई हैव रफली द सेम नंबर ऑफ पिक्सेल्स. So that is histogram equalization. So if I just show you the impact of histogram equalization, we actually get this image. So you can see that the contrast has changed. So there is some adjustment that has happened to this image. And if I show you its histogram, again, if I show you the histogram of the equalized image, sorry, what is happening? Okay, no, sorry. So this was just the equalized image that I'm showing you. So that is the image that I actually showed you here. So if I actually show you the intensity, so I can say I am hist. I think मैंने वो code में show नहीं किया for some reason, I don't know why. नहीं, sorry, किया हुआ, sorry. So या नहीं किया हुआ. Okay, I can do quickly. Okay, so I am hist, and if I show you the image, equalized image one here, so you can see now that the histogram is pretty uniform across all the across the intensity range from 0 to 1. And you have divided it into 64 bins, and roughly the same, not exactly, but roughly the histogram is more equalized or more uniformly distributed as compared to the original image. So again, this is what we call as histogram equalization, and it is very, very important. And the reason we do is the following. मैं आपको reason उसकी बता देता हूँ कि उसकी reason क्या है. And the reason is pretty simple, pretty straightforward here. अगर मैं अपना image देखूं, so if I just use this image, then the pixels or the regions which have high intensity because of more stronger lighting conditions, they will get more preference than other pixels which do not have that much strong representation. So by uniformly distributing the intensities amongst pixels, I can give the same weightage to all the pixels and all the region in the image. So that is what we do for equalization that we are doing. So anybody who has any questions here? So at the same time, I can also specify कि भाई, I can specify a histogram. So let's say कि मैंने एक dark image जो मैंने पहले compute किया था, उसका मैंने एक histogram estimate कर लिया है using IMHist. अब मैं ये चाहता हूं कि जो मेरा original image है, वो इस histogram के मुताबिक adapt हो जाए. So instead of using IMadjust, I can directly give it a histogram which will be a vector of entries, and I can say कि अपने image को जो मेरा current image है, modify it based on this histogram. And this is called histogram specification, which means I'm actually providing it a histogram to modify it. And you can clearly see कि ये image अब आपका bright हो गया. So जो मैंने उस वक्त image adjust किया था gamma correction के through, वही काम मैंने अब histogram specification के through कर दिया. So I can do both. I can correct using correction schemes or contrast enhancement schemes. That's one way. And the other way is I can provide it a desired histogram, and I can use histogram specification to make it brighter. So anybody who has any questions about this? So this is again up till now जो अब तक हमने बात discuss की है. This is not so. This is just for your learning and to play with these images, and just to show you a very, very small subset of tools on image processing that medical imaging people are actually exploiting day in and day out. So these are the tools that that are not just for toy problems. We use it in computer vision, in natural image processing, and also in medical. So before I tune to the task that you're supposed to do, anybody who has any questions here? Anybody who has any question? All right. So अब जो आपको जो टास्क असाइन किए गए हैं इस लैब के लिए, that is more on giving you a practice on image denoising. So I want to, so this is, please pay attention to this one. So again, we have the same image of the house. Now I want to synthesize a noisy image because मेरे पास इस वक्त है नहीं. So if I'm testing my algorithms, I want to simulate some realistic noisy images. So I'm going to call IamNoise command. I'll give it the image. और कौन सी noise है? Gaussian है, salt and pepper है. And if you just search help IamNoise, you will find there are so many different noise distributions that you can actually use. You can simulate Gaussian noise. You can simulate a local variance noise. You can simulate Poisson noise. You can simulate speckle noise, which is also known as multiplicative noise. You can also simulate salt and pepper noise, which is also called on and off. The salt is white, pepper is black. So you can play with all these different noise noise types that we have here. So on the top, I'm actually showing you an image IMG, which is corrupted by Gaussian noise with mean 0 and standard deviation 0.1. Because a Gaussian distribution needs two parameters to be described. It needs a mean, it needs a variance. Variance is the square of the standard deviation. So I call this image noisy Gaussian, corrupted by Gaussian noise. I call the IamNoise command. मैं उसे बताता हूँ कि ये मेरा original clean image है. उसको आपने Gaussian noise से contaminate करना है with mean 0 and variance standard deviation 0.1. Similarly, I take the same image, the same original clean image of the house, and I add salt and pepper noise. And the salt and pepper noise can only be described by a single parameter, which is called noise density. और मैंने उसको 0.02 एक parameter assign कर दिया. So I corrupt these images, and I'll show you how I synthesize noisy images for my experiments. So you can see that this is a clean image. In the middle, you have an image which is corrupted with a very strong Gaussian noise. And on the extreme right, you are seeing black and white spots. This is basically salt and pepper noise. So you can see that the behavior of this noise is quite different. Okay. And the level of this noise is very, very important. So the basic problem in image denoising is, given a corrupted image, how can you estimate a clean image or the original image out of it? So that is the question that we actually deal in image denoising. So we are going to look at how we can generate, how can we reduce noise in these images, corrupted with Gaussian noise and salt and pepper noise. That's what we have. And you are going to use these commands in your task. So pay attention to these line 124 onwards. That's important. Now to denoise an image, I need to have a smoothing filter. मुझे एक ऐसा, जैसे आपने moving average filter पढ़ा था, which was in one dimension. Now you need to have a filter in two dimensions, one along the rows and one along the column. So what I do is I create an averaging filter using the F special command. F is for filter, so it generates these filters. And again, if I just do help F special, I can see that the MATLAB is pretty rich in filters. You can simulate average filter, disk filter, Gaussian filter, Laplacian filter, Laplacian of Gaussian filter, Prewitt operators, Sobel operators. And all these operators are very, very important, and we teach them in image processing course. But again, I won't go into the details of these, but each of these filters have their own unique properties. But again, we are going to look at the averaging filter that you have studied. And now, because you need to define an averaging window, so now you need a 2D window. आपका 1D averaging जब हो रही थी, you had a 1D interval. कि मुझे let's say पिछली 5 entries को average करना है. अगर मैंने एक running sum लेना है, running average filter मैंने बनाना है. इस केस में मुझे एक 2-dimensional window बनानी पड़ेगी. And let me assume that my window is 3x3. तो वो 3x3 का एक neighborhood लेगा, which means it will take 9 pixels, 3 times 3, to average them. So I use the F special command to create an average filter with a 3x3 window. And again, I use the same command F special to generate a 5x5 window for the averaging filter. तो ये मैंने एक filter generate कर लिया. And now to call the function IamFilter. और वो जो मैंने filter पिछली line में बनाया है, वो मैंने उसे pass कर दिया. So it has only two inputs: the noisy image and the smoothing filter that you have generated here. Okay. तो इस averaging filter के साथ एक और filter है, which we call as the 2-dimensional. So this is for 2-dimensional median filter. This is a non-linear filter that we have here. Okay. So एक non-linear filter ये क्या करता है कि एक 3x3 का neighborhood लेता है और उसमें जो pixel का median है वो output कर देता है. So remember, mean is the average value, mode is the most repeated value, median is the central value in a distribution. So that's what we have. So मैंने कहा कि इसको median filter apply करो, उसको noisy image दो, और उसको एक 3x3 की, and compute the median in a local neighborhood of 3x3. So I've done smoothing of these 3 images, noisy images, and I can show you how they actually look like. And you can use these commands at will. So these commands are all for your at your disposal. So you can see now. Okay, there is something more missing. Okay. कि अब जो मेरे पास जो मैंने फिगर प्लॉट की है, I have now divided this figure in a 2x2 block. तो 2 rows हैं, 2 columns हैं. तो सब plot 2,2 आ गया. This first block will be 1, this will be 2, this will be 3, this will be 4. So this is your image which is corrupted with Gaussian noise. This is smoothing with an averaging filter of 3x3 window size. This is with a 5x5 window size, and this is median filter. And clearly we can see that when we increase the size of the window, our image becomes smoother, but it is still far away from my original image. Okay. And this is the median filter that we have, and it didn't do a very good job here, unfortunately. So anybody who has any questions up till now? So your job is to use these commands directly, assemble them, and just complete your task as Dr. Momin is suggesting. So guys, please ask questions. This is a very important point now. So we're about to end. So I want that you ask questions here. Okay. Similarly, one more thing, if I just tell you, which we are not going to talk about in these tasks, is what if I want to simulate blurring in the image? So again, I can call the F special command, और मैं उससे कहता हूँ कि motion blur create करो, और the first element is for the horizontal blurring, and the second element is for the vertical blurring. So it's a 2D image. और मैं उससे कहता हूँ कि 10 pixels horizontally उसको blur कर. So I use the 2-dimensional convolution. So I hope you have seen the convolution command. The conv is for 1-dimensional signals. Conv2 is for 2-dimensional signals. And an image is a 2-dimensional object. So I give it the original image, which is clean and pure. और मैं उसे वो motion blurring दे देता हूँ जो मैंने यहाँ पे बनाई. So if I actually quickly show you this one here, this is what we get. So this is your original image, and you can clearly see that the blurring is happening in the horizontal direction for 10 pixels. So मैंने 10 pixels को लिया और उन्हें average कर दिया आपस में. So averaging is a smoothing operation, and it introduces blurring in your image. So the concept of image de-blurring is कि जो भी मैंने आपको motion artifacts pet images में दिखाए, so those motion artifacts introduce blurring, and the job is to reconstruct your image or restore your image to the original quality by removing those blurring artifacts. So that's what we have. Okay. All right. So now if I go back to the last and final thing, okay, let me again show you these noisy images जो हमने smooth किए हैं, which is very, very important because that's the task at hand. And this will be my last thing. ये हमारे पास images आए थे. And I'm just showing you with Gaussian noise. Salt and pepper के साथ नहीं कराया, but that is what you're going to do in the task. So this was the original image corrupted with Gaussian noise. I applied an averaging filter with the 3x3 window. Kernel is a window basically. Then I multiplied with a 5x5 window, and then I used a non-linear median filter with a 3x3 window. Now, अब ये visually तो मैं इनको देख सकता हूँ कि भाई इनमें से कौन सा बेहतर है, and I can make an argument. But is there any quantitative metric that I can compute that can tell me the performance, my restoration performance? And जिस तरह हमारे signals के अंदर signal to noise ratio होता है, इसी तरह हमारे पास यहाँ पर command होती है PSNR, which is called the peak signal to noise ratio. And I want to compute the signal to noise ratio with the clean image and the images that I have. तो सबसे पहले मैं क्या करता हूँ कि noisy image के साथ उसका PSNR आपको compute करके दिखाता हूँ. That comes down to 11.3 decibel. The unit is decibels, which is very, very small. Now, once I actually perform the first smoothing with an averaging kernel of the 3x3 kernel, उसमें मेरे पास जो PSNR है वो improve हो गया from 11.3 decibels to 19.81 decibels. So it means that I have managed to restore some quality because this is computing the P signal to noise ratio by comparing the original image with the noisy image, the original image with the smoothed image. Now let me see the second smoothed image that I had. The PSNR is further improved to 21.72 decibels, which is again very good. If I look at the third image, which I got after median filtering, its PSNR was 17.51. So we can clearly see that among these three filters, the best smoothing or the best restoration performance was achieved by using a 5x5 window which gave me the highest peak signal to noise ratio. So here I have actually taught you a quantitative metric that actually tells you how to measure the quality of your restoration. Ji Aisha.
So what if we compare IMG with IMG? What would the PSNR be then?
Infinity. Because everything is matching.
So basically, PSNR means, I don't know what it logically means. Can you
Okay,
please
okay, मैं आपको बता देता हूँ. मैं आपको बता. PSNR is basically just a moment. A moment. Could you give me access to the other account also to share the screen? Let me just quickly show you.
Doesn't try करेंगे.
हाँ जी हो रहा है बिल्कुल. Thank you. So basically what we have is your signal to noise ratio. So if I explain to you, it's basically some, as it says, so it's basically some measure. Okay, so I would say the power of your signal, which is the important thing that you are interested, divided by your noise measure. So if you have, so the signal is basically the information that you're interested in. Noise is what is actually trying to confuse you. So if your SNR is 0, it means that your signal, either your signal is 0 or your noise measure is too high, which means that this is a useless thing. I can't do anything. If your signal to noise ratio is infinity, it means that there is no noise in your image, which is the absolute perfect case, the ideal scenario that we have. But when you have a SNR, which is in between the 0 and infinity, it means that आपका जितना SNR ज़्यादा होगा, it means you have more strength of your important signal and less impact of your noise. So one way to measure this signal to noise ratio is the following, जो medical imaging में करते हैं. वो मैं आपको एक बता देता हूँ very quickly. Again, this is a bit elaborate, तो मैं उसमें जाना नहीं चाहता. Let's say ये मेरे पास एक image था. This is my brain. I mean, not my brain, but anyway, this is the brain. And let's say this is the tumor. अब मैं ये चाहता हूं कि I want to reconstruct this tumor as accurately as possible. So what I want, I look at what I call as a tumor to background ratio. I look at the mean intensity of the tumor pixels, and this is my background here. This is my background region somewhere here, divided by the mean of the background. तो अगर मेरे पास ये वैल्यू जितनी बड़ी होगी, it means my tumor region has a higher intensity and my background region has a lower intensity, which means I can easily differentiate my tumor region with the normal healthy tissue. समझ आ रही है बात की? तो signal to noise ratio is exactly similar. The higher the signal to noise ratio, it's some measure of signal over noise. तो जितना ये ratio आपका ज्यादा होगा, you can easily differentiate your signal with noise. जितना ये कम होगा, you cannot differentiate what is signal and what is noise.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So again, there's a lot of when you go to communications and signal processing, inshallah, you will see these things in more detail, in more mathematical detail. बासित आपने किस बारे में कहा है कि मुझे repeat करना है?
सर आपने समझा दिया अभी यही point था.
Okay, okay. So again, just think about कि it is some measure of contrast. The thing is how efficiently I can differentiate between my region of interest and all other background. Okay, so tumor to background ratio is one measure that we use in medical images. So anyway, so that's about it from my side. I've taken more time than I should have, but hopefully this was something that was motivating and inspiring to you. Again, so I think you can go back to your tasks, and I'm here to actually supervise. Again, there's nothing difficult. Those tasks can be, none of those tasks are more than 15 minutes long, trust me. So just use these commands that I've shared with you. And if you have any questions, I'm here. Thank you.
So may I also add that the sample code, as I've been typing in the chat box as well, is on LMS. So you just download that and almost everything is there. All you need to do is to run different images through that sample code and write down your observations. Okay. So that's more or less what you need to do. Okay. So this should be much easier than it may have sounded. Okay. Acha, the other thing is I just want to give a shout out to each and every one of you. So last week we only had a bonus task, and more than 40% of the students actually turned them in, which is, I believe, a very healthy number. So keep up the good work. And with that, so you're free to start doing your MATLAB tasks. May I also remind you that the next lab is going to be the last regular lab, and following that, we're going to start our work on the projects. Okay, so which will most likely be in teams of 2 to 3 students. So you start talking amongst yourselves, teams kaise banani aap logon ne, and then we'll present some ideas, project which you would have to choose from.